the blue marble on cue. I want to just say before I begin that I'm really happy to be here at Brooks. We've probably had 30 exhibits, 30 to 50 exhibits actually over the last 10 years at schools. And this is one of the few schools that have really actively engaged the exhibit with the curriculum. And I really want to thank all the teachers, and I want to thank Babs and even Ryan for putting up this beautiful picture of the blue marble to help with my talk. I want to talk to you this morning about two ideas. One is about wandering, and the other's about stewardship. There was a novelist about 100 years ago who said, "Wandering reestablishes the original harmony with which once existed between man and the universe." And my wife, Sally Eagle, and I are here today, and through our exhibit, to encourage you to wander and to see the world that is your home. And in doing so, discover how your faith, your insight, your motivation might lead you to be good stewards of our planet. Many years ago, probably 50 years ago, when the first astronauts left the confines of the Earth, they took a photograph that greatly changed people's perception of their relationship to Mother Earth. That was the image. Now for us who grew up in that moment of time, seeing this image really challenged us to have a different sense of self, because we're part of this. We're a grain of sand floating out in the universe somewhere. It was the blue marble, an elegant but a self-contained whole as it seemingly hung suspended in the universe. It filled everyone who saw it with wonder and challenged us to recalibrate our notion of who we were in relation to it. The earth seemed more fragile, more pure somehow. It also provoked our collective sense of purpose in a way, and made us more sensitive toward our exploitation of the earth and its resources. It challenged us to give back, and soon after, these realizations gave birth to Earth Day. Do you guys celebrate Earth Day here in April? I hope so. Over the last 40 years or so, Sally and I have wanted to explore various parts of our world instead of just going on vacation in the typical sense. We've usually gone to explore somewhere we've never been. Another culture, another part of the world we haven't seen, people and wildlife we haven't yet encountered. It's often brought us great joy, great satisfaction, sometimes a feeling of real humility, but most often a sense of wonder, enlarging our worldview. While the challenges of travel can be daunting, the rewards have far outweighed the burdens. And while distant cultures and amazing wildlife encounters have enlivened these travels, nothing touches the soul more than being in the wilderness of various continents. In the past century, the economics of the industrial age and now the technological age has challenged those in power to reflect on the Earth's natural balance. This is propelling us toward another age of extinction, the Anthropocene, with humans unsustainably exploiting Earth's resources. Nevertheless, we are each the caretakers of the natural world. No matter where we've grown up, in the city and suburbia, or in the country, we're compelled to understand our role in the universe. It fashions our sense of identity. We have to realize that we are stewards of our environment. We are the ones who have to balance our belief systems so that we give to and care for as much as we take. Sometimes our spiritual nature can help realign our thinking. For instance, in Buddhism, as it was for the American Indians, there's an emphasis on balance, on interconnectedness. creating a mindset that imagines a productive and cooperative relationship between human beings and nature. This promise of interconnection makes Buddhist thinking effective in cultivating modesty and compassion and balance among people. In 1980, we took a trip to Nepal and we spent 3 weeks hiking to Mount Everest, and we went through a part of the country that was a Buddhist. Nepal is both Buddhist and Hindu, but took us through this beautiful Buddhist part of the country. And we began for the first time to really sense how different that was from our own upbringing. So we experienced this firsthand in the Himalayan region where stewardship is a primary concern. Nepal has seen extraordinary pressures from tourism and a resulting exploitation of its natural resources. In contrast, learning from its neighbor, the fourth king of Bhutan. Bhutan is a little further east in the Himalaya from Nepal. The fourth king of Bhutan declared that tourism be carefully managed. And in fact, the first year we went to Bhutan back in, I think it was 1999, there were only 2,500 people allowed in the country at the time. Now it's something in the neighborhood of 50 or 60,000. It's a big change. The king also decreed that over 60% of the forests remain untouched forever. He also banned plastic bags and the use of tobacco. He emphasized traditional timber-framed architecture, which minimizes environmental impact by adhering to less mechanical building methods. He's been mindful of maintaining that balance between modernization and the maintenance of traditional values. People of the region are amongst the most poorest, but also among the most generous and happy people that we've ever met. In fact, the country's economic model is based on the concept of gross national happiness instead of gross national product. And this is where economic considerations must address how successfully decisions will impact that goal. As you might suspect, the balance in nature, once interrupted, is much harder to maintain. In the last 10 years, Sally and I have witnessed the impact of climate change in both the northern and southern hemispheres. In the Antarctica, during unusually warm seasons, some Adelie penguins, we were actually talking about that in a statistics class this morning. Some Adelie penguin colonies have returned to their nesting grounds and found it just a rocky shoreline with puddles amongst the rocks. Therefore, the eggs won't mature and survive, in which they use to build their nests. The search for food is also taking all penguin species further out to sea due to warmer waters, seriously depleting not only their energy reserves, but their ability to bring back adequate food for their young. Up north in the Arctic, the kittiwakes, these little tiny birds, these little tiny sort of seagull-like birds, the kittiwakes, a species of seagull, have begun to lose their feeding stock during the breeding season as warmer waters have moved in earlier than normal, and they're driving out the fish that they feed upon. So without the food sources, their young, when their eggs have hatched, won't have food to survive. So they're anticipating that the kittiwake population is going to die out in the next several years. Just die out. In Brazil, in the largest wetland in the world, the Pantanal, which is the size of France, I mean, it's a huge, huge wetland. The economics of ecotourism have helped to spur legislative changes. Cattle ranchers can no longer sequester their cattle on pastures during the rainy season where the cattle were sitting ducks for the jaguars. It was estimated that 10,000 jaguars were shot and killed by ranchers over a 10-year period prior to our arrival. Now that they're required to move the cattle away from those ranches during the rainy season, and the jaguar population has rebounded significantly. So you can now go down there and get on a boat and go up and down the rivers and see jaguars every day, constantly. Not constantly, but you would see 6 or 8 or 10 jaguars, where previously, if they saw human beings, they would run, right? Because they were in danger of being shot. Now that they're required to move the cattle, and the jaguar population has rebounded significantly, as has the caiman crocodile population on which they prey. The caiman population had a bounty. The caiman crocodiles had bounties on them because they were being used for leather goods back in the 70s and 80s. And once that bounty was taken off the caiman population grew, and there's now something like 10 million caiman in the Pantanal. So there's plenty of food for the jaguars. Anyway, they no longer feel threatened by humans. The jaguars feel safe to patrol the riverbanks and practically pose as fishermen and photographers cruise by. And that's how we got the photograph of the jaguar ambushing the caiman that's in the Lehman Gallery. That had never been seen before. It was so out in the open. And the wildlife biologists were just amazed when we showed them the video. So we've also seen the oldest deserts, the Namib Desert in southwest Africa, the Atacama Desert in Chile, and the Antarctica, where flora and fauna have adapted to an amazingly delicate existence. Yet their future is also threatened by man's relentless quest to exploit natural resources from these most fragile ecosystems. Wildlife of all kinds are under increasing threat. China, in particular, has been aggressive in seeking out minerals, oil and gas, and potential food sources in many sensitive areas for their burgeoning human population at home. Yet we've also been encouraged by the balance that has been achieved in island countries whose margins have necessarily created a consciousness about finite resources. We visited both Iceland and New Zealand a couple of times and found that they are good examples of how stewardship is at the forefront of the political, economic, and social discourse. I don't know if you follow politics, you probably don't, but there's some great new young leadership in those countries, and it's a real inspiration. We've been fortunate to see areas of our own country. Most recently, we floated deep through the Grand Canyon for 10 days. That's been preserved over decades by thoughtful and generous and insightful leaders. Edward Abbey, the author and essayist noted for his advocacy of environmental issues, once said, "The love of wilderness is more than a hunger for what is always beyond reach. It is also an expression of loyalty to the earth which bore us and sustains us, the only paradise we shall ever know, the only paradise we will ever need if only we had the eyes to see." So we need to resist the pressures that are leading our politicians to reverse environmental protections that ensure our clean water and clean air and protect wildlife. We need to fight to preserve our national and state parks from intrusive exploitation, from overgrazing on Western lands to mining, and yes, even to the encroachment of an ever-expanding infrastructure within those national parks, which are seeing increasing numbers of visitors to those wild and sacred spaces. In conclusion, we hope that the images that surround you in the Lehman Gallery will help your eyes to see. We hope you'll wander the earth with a reverence for life that allows you to appreciate the remaining biodiversity and supports your values of stewardship. As you go out into the world, give as much as you can to protecting the earth, your home. And do your best to spend time wandering in the wilderness. As Nicholas Kristof, the New York Times essayist, writer for the Times, he says, when the world seems to be falling apart, when we humans seem to be creating messes everywhere we turn, maybe it's time to rejuvenate in the cathedral of the wilderness, and there, away from humanity, rediscover our own humanity. Thank you.